Sorry, are you not hearing us?
I just started hearing you, Mark.
Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry.
Oh no.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll go back and recover a few things then. I'm sorry. I thought we had it up and going here. So good catch, Spencer. Thank you. We would have went for the next hour not having anybody talking. All right. Well, I'm going to quick switch back, and then I'm going to have April repeat her question because it was a great question. Quick little overview. Nope. Thanks a bunch, guys. Yeah. And kind of hard coming off of that where we had a 10-minute break. That's the longest 10 minutes for me ever. So use that as a way to either put your notes up at the beginning of class to get your students prepped on what they should be thinking about. It gives you a few minutes to kind of get your head about you on what you're going to present today. So it seems like a hard 10 minutes, but it's a great 10 minutes because it really settles your students into the content for the day and prepares them for the conversation. So welcome aboard. We appreciate everybody joining in. A couple other quick announcements. Make sure you're doing your Dove surveys to get those Dove points. If you're new and don't know what I'm talking about, let me know and I'll help you out with the Dove points. But there's a survey that you can take to help guide our programming and other content that we might share. So make sure you're doing that. You get credit for it. You might get prizes out of drawings from it, but also we track it for HLC. So it's important to have everybody do their surveys after these kinds of events. So any kind of lunch and learns, creative conversations, those kinds of things, make sure that you're taking a chance to fill that out. And then last, this is a first part of a two-part series. We're going to do a conversation right now, so you get a chance to talk amongst yourselves about rubrics. And we'll be sharing ideas and thoughts and strategies from you rather than Spencer and I talking to you. And then the second part of this is next Thursday, Spencer is going to be hosting a rubric workshop. So you can take a look at other people's rubrics, kind of share your own for feedback and get some hands-on time with rubrics. With that, I'm going to open it up to open conversations about rubrics and what you've all found in the resources. And April had a great question, so I'm going to switch over to April quick and have her fire away with her first question and go from there.
So I just kind of wanted to get feedback from everybody else attending to see if you're using holistic rubrics. I hadn't really been familiar with that term before reading this material. In the back of my mind, just assigning something with one column of, yep, it's a 4, 3, 2, or a 1 is almost not worthy of creating a rubric. So I'd like to know if anyone is doing that, and if so, how exactly is it helping you? To me, it feels like it's almost worse than not having a rubric, where I would then type lots of comments. So I guess I just would like to know more about actually how is that working logistically for a lot of you if you're using it.
You're not using it, Seth? Is that what I'm getting from you?
I'm not using those.
Interesting.
I feel like it's almost very useful for something that if you're working through the process of going through, like writing a paper or filing something down as a scientific writing or something like that, it's more relevant there as a final grade, but not useful on the build up to it.
Okay, so summative, not formative.
Yeah.
And then it did say in the
No, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it said in the materials that developmental rubrics were a subset of analytic, and I guess I was just thinking they're almost the same thing. It's just how you want to frame the levels, and developmental feels a bit kinder, certainly for maybe assignments earlier on. It's like more supportive, I guess, of the students, but if there's a difference beyond that in my understanding, I would love to hear about that as well.
Gina, I saw your hand go up.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was going to say, going back to the first question that you had, I would say for me, the holistic rubric section, I do teach doctoral scholarly project 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the graduate students. So for me, I do utilize it because we have a credit, no credit type of grading system. And again, if they do fully need improvement, they can't move on to the next section of that scholarly paper until they have completed all of those steps. And so following the Squire guidelines and making sure that we hit all the marks. And this is actually the first time that our team and Dr. Wade's leading the charge on this has created an actual checklist that they're to follow, because we were not having, I think around last time this year, we weren't having as many students understanding the guidelines, even though we had provided the template and what to put in them. And so it's more of an organizational structure, but holistically, if they can't get every single piece, we're not able to move on to the next week's assignment because we're adding to that every single time. So to Seth's point, for us, that does matter, because in the graduate program, that last year is all their scholarly projects. So if they can't make sufficient headway in the first semester or two, they can't move on to the second or the third because of those pieces that are missing. So for us, that does work. Again, that's a no credit course. So I think that would be the reasoning there, because a lot of the feedback I have to say, like, for example, this week I had a couple that I had to give no credit, even though they had submitted the work, but they weren't able to get those key concepts down within the paper rubric that they were supposed to be following. So I had to give them that feedback with the checklist and the grammatical errors from their paper combined for them to understand what pieces they were missing to move on to the next week assignment. So for us, that does matter, but not everybody's having to use that. I noticed, and to your point, that's the first time I've heard of that term, and I didn't realize that that's what we were doing until I read through that. So that's nice to see. But I don't have anything for the analytical side. I'm sorry I didn't get that far, but thank you.
Tracy, I saw your light flash. Did you have a question for us or a comment?
Oh, nope.
Okay, great. Awesome. Any other thoughts or observations?
Hey, it's Ashley. I found that I changed one of my rubrics like it was like before, oh, was it last semester? And I felt like the more details I put in of what I required, which is more like the analytical rubric, correct? It seemed like here are your requirements. What'd you say?
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it seemed like the more I didn't have as many details before because it was a rubric that I inherited. So I was trying to like research. So it's nice that that you guys gave us a lot of resources, because I found out that the analytical rubric seemed to help the students a lot on what's required of me. And honestly, for grading as well, it was a lot easier to grade.
Yes.
Did anybody else feel like that who's used analytical rubrics? I'm newer to teaching, so this is a lot of brand new stuff to me.
That's why we do these.
I definitely find it's really helpful. My graduate students know to look for rubrics, and if they don't see one, they will ask for one. My undergraduate students sometimes have to be reminded, hey, they're there, and you can use these for a checklist. And then once they realize that, then I start to see better assignments, absolutely. But I generally have to tell many of them first.
I've generally found that it really depends the rubric on what you're wanting the students to do. Because when I first started, I had a rubric for each of my lab reports. This is the Bio 200 AP, like that's the level you're at. Like, and I had this idea of like, oh, these are the things, and it was just way too much. And it didn't really make sense. Whereas that checklist was much more reliable for what I wanted out of them to do that. I didn't want them focusing too much on how to write. So it got too much. But when I had free response questions for my exams, that I would let the students have the question a week before, but they had to have a really well written response. I found that that analytic type rubric was really beneficial. So it really depends on what you want out of it. What is your assignment? And I made that mistake early.
You know, speaking of exams, Seth, I wish we could apply rubrics to exams in Brightspace, like essay exams. We tried to do that with our graduate level students, giving them a midterm and a final and, you know, answer these questions. And then we were going to grade them on rubrics just for continuity between the 3 sections. But then we discovered you can't do that, at least not right now. So we had to take it out as a quiz and put the same questions in as like a study guide, which they download, type in the answers and submit like a paper, and then we can use the rubrics. So we developed a workaround, but I think it'd be awesome if we could do that on, you know, short answer essay questions for exams. That'd be great.
Interesting idea. Can you just give them the short answer? You still can't use the rubric though in grading, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Essentially, having it off on the side as a paper piece or even as a digital artifact that they could look at as they were doing the exam
Yeah.
would be helpful, but it doesn't help in the grading side,
Right.
which is, if you're not using the rubrics for grading, talk to Spencer or I or Sonia, one of the 3 of us, because it will save you tremendous amounts of time in grading materials as well. So make sure you're using the rubrics for you as much as for your students.
Are any of you guys using that little rubric piece at the end? I struggle with that, and I wish I could delete it sometimes, but I'm not using it, and that also trips me up on points sometimes. Like there's the big rubric itself, and then right below that there's like an overall one. I feel like it just kind of confuses the students, and I don't really ever know what to do with it. Maybe I'm not using it to its best potential in Brightspace. I don't know, sometimes I just wish I could delete it or make it not visible.
I better not jump in there now. You'll see that playing, but I'll take a look at that as well to see if there's a way to do it.
You know what I mean?
I know which one you're
Yeah.
talking about. To me, it's just a total, a summation of your rubric,
Yeah.
but
I feel
I
like
can
you've
see
already
what
got the rubric to look through. That's quite a
Yeah.
lot. I don't really know.
yeah. So let me take a look at that and see if there's a way to get rid of that.
That'd be cool.
I have to agree with April on students asking for the rubric. A lot of our students coming in, I don't think understand the rubrics and what they do and how much help they can be in giving you guidance as to what the instructor is looking for. So that's certainly something we can look at, is to talking more with the students, but I would encourage you all to make sure they understand what a rubric is, what it does, walk through. I know a lot of you do syllabus walkthroughs. It may not be a bad idea to walk through just a general rubric and show them what it is.
That's true.
Is some of those entry classes, because having them understand that and what you're looking for, then you are getting out of the assignments much more of what you're looking for.
That's true. You know, one thing. Yeah, go ahead, Seth.
So going back to your question about putting rubrics in quizzes or exams, while you can't put a rubric in there specifically, if you want to have it all in just an exam file, you can always put a hint on that question and have the hint be the rubric.
Oh, so it would help the students, but then I couldn't necessarily use it to grade. So it would solve part of the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I was going to say one thing I had for a note to bring up today, and maybe it's for next week. I don't know if this happens, it must happen to somebody besides me. I'll create a rubric and then it will take me a couple terms using the rubric to realize it's not working the best. I'm either taking off too many points on one of the criterions or not enough. But then I've gone through a year or 2 of using it before I realize that and tweak it. So I don't know if there's a way or a formula to use to realize this sooner. Maybe that's just in some kind of designer checkpoint when it's created. I don't know. But that definitely is a problem. You know, have someone who definitely did quite a bit worse on an assignment, and then at the end of the day, it's like, oh, they only got a B as opposed to a B+ from this other student. But there felt like there was a bigger difference in their papers, so.
Anybody else run into that challenge? one of the ways I work through some of that is to actually go through and look at 3 to 5 of the assignments first to get an overall view of what
Okay.
the average is going to look like, because that first person typically pays the penalty. You have these grandiose ideas of what your expectations are, and you grade that first paper, and they may be fantastic compared to everyone else.
Yeah,
But you grade them hard because they're graded against your expectations versus what
okay,
the rest of the course did. So I tend to read 3 to 5 first, get an idea
Oh,
of what
sure.
I expect or what
Yeah.
I'm getting, then go back to the rubric and start to fill out the rubric and see if that fits a little better.
I will strategically, especially if I'm not sure how something's gonna turn out, I will strategically start with who I know to be the best students in my class.
Yeah.
I'll start with the top 10% and then I'll kind of go down from there so that I'm not being too hard on them.
I like that idea. Maybe you start with the top 2 and the bottom 2.
Well, that's an idea, yeah,
And that way you get a range of kind of what you think's going to happen.
yep. And maybe I could even, or any of us could, if we're creating a rubric for the first time, look back at the previous semester where we didn't have one and read some of those assignments and kind of see what the pitfalls were and where the rubric needs to focus. So that might help. That's a good idea.
So we've already heard from a couple of people about some of the things that they read that intrigued them or were like aha moments. Were there any other intriguing or aha moments out there?
Hi.
Okay, was there anything that you guys read or saw that was like, oh man, I don't agree with that? Or you didn't like, or something along those lines?
I did, one thing I guess I would just ask about, it's not that I agreed or disagreed, but there was a link to the value rubrics that we use. The AAC and U, the ones that we have here at our college for like civic engagement. And I was just wondering, like, there's an enormous amount of content on that website. Like, what's the best thing for some of us to take away from that in terms of rubric design? Did anyone have something in mind specific, or is it just a good example of rubrics in general?
Yeah, did you, that's, what was it, number 7 on the list?
I believe so.
Yep, it's number 7 on the list. If you guys want to open that one up, the value rubrics. And that's through AQ. No, I'm sorry, no, it's not. It's the AACU.
You know, if nothing else, I mean, I guess when you click on those, you can get previews, and maybe it's just a good guide for some people starting out with rubrics. I mean, like there's a problem solving one on there, which might be good for some of our newer or younger students.
There's critical thinking, which I know a lot, I've heard a lot since I've been here in my short few months, a lot about critical thinking. Are you guys able to online, are you all able to see that site that we're talking about?
You said it's number 7 on the list?
Yeah, that's correct. It's called Value Rubrics.
Yes.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, I didn't realize they had so many. We use, what, 5 or 6 here at the college? There's a ton of stuff on there. Teamwork, like we could be using some of these to grade our students on teamwork and problem solving and just kind of some more basic global things all across no matter what you teach.
Mhm. So I'm not 100% familiar with the educated citizen, but are some of these rubrics in here, are those concepts in the educated citizen?
I think with adaptations.
With adaptation.
Yeah, because there's like oral presentation for educated citizen, because I remember adding that to one of my courses where they did like talking in a presentation.
Oh, excellent. Yes. So the way I look at this, and you guys agree with me or disagree with me, whatever you feel, but the way I look at this, when you have those course outcomes, and one of them might be, well, we'll just take your example, oral communication. Your students, that's one of your course outcomes. Your students need to be able to communicate. Essentially, what this is a rubric to focus solely on that oral communication. And what are we looking for? And that's all it is. It doesn't include any of the nursing information or any of the sonography or whatever other skills you might be looking for. This just focuses on the oral communication piece.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the general ideas are similar because there's also written communication, I know, is an educated citizen rubric. So they have a couple of those values on there. And I know that they're generic so that it applies for every like
Yes.
profession in the college because they can't be specific. So I've had those in a few of mine, but I obviously have had to add more into my rubrics to make it more specific to the information they're trying to present.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So Tracy, Angie, or Gina, what do you guys think this is something that might be valuable in your classes, or is this something that you don't want to have anything to do with? What are your thoughts?
I think all of, looking at these rubrics are going to be beneficial to create all the new ones that we were previously working on this summer. And I do see the alignment with the educated citizen as well, like some of the evidence identifying, um, I'm looking at the critical thinking one right now, actually.
Oh,
But yeah,
sure.
it's definitely beneficial.
Do any of you use these in your classes to ensure consistent grading across sections or to reduce grade inflation? Because that's one reason I'm thinking of using more of them in my classes so that I've got.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do
Right
you
now, there's a lot of the stuff that's very much so like completion versus really, graded thoroughly. So yes.
Okay. So that's working well, you're saying?
Well, no, I'd like to incorporate more rubrics, just like you're saying, to have that consistency.
Yeah, I went into one of my adjuncts courses a while back and everyone in the class got either a 100, an 85, or a 70. This was years ago. And I thought, okay, well, maybe a rubric might help fine tune the grading and also get the students some really meaningful feedback. So I think it's going to make things better across the board if we can get these in more of our classes, especially if we have multiple sections and adjuncts are covering them because they're busy people.
So that kind of opens up another question I have for you, all of you. If you are teaching in multiple sections and other professors or faculty are helping you teach those other sections, how do you make sure that you're both using the rubric the same way? like for example, my idea, if we're on the critical thinking, rubric, the first thing is explanation of ideas. And then it talks about, this is the capstone level, this is a milestone level. How do you differentiate between the two, between you and your colleagues?
I think I just kind of go to what we did for, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a brain for was it the portfolio maybe grading, where we had the rubrics, and we all sat down in a group and went through several examples together just to see where we would grade them and why. That was really beneficial so that we could all kind of see, where we stood, where we could make changes, if we were too lenient or not. So I would go that route, especially with, a group of faculty.
I love that idea. Did you find that you were all pretty close in rating your rubrics similarly, or were you guys pretty far apart and had to come to some kind of an agreement?
We were pretty close. I mean, it was a, 1 to 4, 1 to 5 scale. It wasn't anything too crazy. I think that with a larger scale, larger point values, we might see more variation, but for those, we were definitely pretty close.
Great.
That also tells me, because I remember doing that when we used to have to do that live, with the rubrics. You'd have to grade and give points and assign it in like 2 minutes, and the next person would be up on stage giving their capstone talk, and we would all sit down, and it was funny. There was always somebody who was an easy grader, someone who was overly tough, and somebody who was in between. But we graded consistently within that. So kind of, if we all thought something was better or worse, it was reflected on our ratings. But it makes me think something all of us could probably do that would be helpful is if we're going to bring rubrics into our classes to grade assignments, and we have multiple sections, but we want there to be consistent grading because students are going to talk. We should probably test it ahead of time, like you're mentioning, to see if we do have inter-rater reliability on a few, like, dummy assignments, fake assignments up front. I think that would be really smart.
Hi, Spencer. This is Gina again. For us, I think, we definitely, especially the EDD sections or the other sections for DNP, when we meet synchronously, we do review it. And then what happens is if we have common check-ins with a lot of our students very often within like 1 to 2 weeks after an assignment. If we hear I will say, if a student's emailing me about inconsistencies in gradings, because we have multiple people teaching different sections, we immediately I'll send an email and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I'm seeing. And then we go ahead and meet through Teams and just kind of look at what our differences in grading are. And that's very important, especially I feel, to your point on different adjuncts, if we're not grading simultaneously, and then you have a different instructor for the next semester, but in a similar course, you think how that person grades because it's supposed to be standardized, but it may not be. So then we always come together for feedback at the close of the course to say what went well, what didn't go well, and how can we better look at these rubrics to make sure that there's no confusion across sections. I know that Dr. Kinshu is really good at that and organizing it, and then also I've gotten better now that I'm the core for the geriatrics classes. And making sure that there's that closed loop communication even at the end of the course, and say we do hire on a new adjunct, or if there is another FTE that's created, we know that that person's going to need to have that orientation when they onboard, because I know from coming from an online adjunct to a full-time position, I never got that kind of orientation. And so there was, at that first year, I was doing things a little differently than some of my colleagues, and I had no idea. So for me personally, I like doing that up front, and then during those every 5 week kind of check-ins with your team, and then also, doing that feedback loop at the end, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So it's a lot of meeting touch points, but we would only call it if we necessarily hear from the students and we're having differences in our coursework. So that's kind of how we've been doing it. But I find it helpful because, again, if I have a student turn in an assignment and they say, where's the rubric, or why is this not consistent? The first thing I say is, did somebody didn't put it into the bright space? Or two, do you have the same rubric I'm looking at for across each section number even, and making sure that something didn't accidentally get updated last year that maybe didn't get loaded properly. So we go from there. So.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing, Gina. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing once we start communicating with each other about what we find out, and it helps us as well think about grading in a different light, because we're not all the same people, and being able to pick other people's brains for why did they grade that so low, or why did they grade that so high in comparison to myself is invaluable, and it really helps level that playing field as far as grading is concerned, especially when we talk about rubrics. All right. Well, I think we still have some time left, but I wanted to know if there was anything else out there that attracted your attention, or something you wanted to talk about with rubrics in particular, to the documents or the videos that we sent out. Anything else?
I guess I would just add that first link you sent, I thought, Spencer, was really helpful. And maybe we can bring this up again next week, building better rubrics. There were some really awesome examples, because sometimes I struggle as to, okay, where do I start with this rubric? But it was, hey, here's things you can mention about written assignments. And then a column of, hey, here's what you can mention about performance or behavior. So it had it all broken down with little criteria examples. I think if people didn't get a chance to really digest that, that would be worth your time. I thought it was great.
Oh yeah, this is the one that had a bunch of video examples as
Yes.
well, and where to begin. And yes, this is I thought all the resources were really good, but yeah, this one is really one of those, like, okay, where do I even start?
Yes.
And so that was yes, oftentimes, especially when we're all starting out, it's like, okay, where do I even start with this?
Yeah.
Or we have a new assignment that we've created and we want to add a rubric to it. Okay, what do I do? So. Yep, and that's all based on that backward design piece that we that we hit hard and create. The idea of starting with the outcomes, or the course goals. What do the students need to know by the end of the course? That kind of thing. So excellent. Let's see. I saw some comments pop up. Not there. Yeah. Let's see. Here we go. Thank you. Okay. Sweet. Okay, so hearing nothing else, I want to be cognizant of your time. So please don't forget to fill out those surveys, especially for your Dove points, so that you can be given credit for attending, and as well as, if you are interested in coming to the workshop, it's a lunch and learn. It's not really a workshop per se, but what we'll be doing during that time is we'll be taking a look at your rubrics. So if you have a rubric that you would like us to look at as a team of faculty, I'll take everyone's name off of it, so there won't be like identifying information or whatever, but that way we can just, what I would like you to do is send me that rubric. That way we can have some examples to look at as a group of faculty, and take a look at, how can we improve this rubric? Does this rubric need improvement? That kind of thing. So Yeah, if there's nothing else, then the time is yours, and it was great to see you all here.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. April, thanks for coming to the face-to-face.
Oh, sure.
I enjoy this so much better.
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry-
was looking forward to it
I'm
too.
sorry
I'm
if I
like,
feel like my back was at you a lot because I was like, well, I don't
No,
know
yeah,
where to turn.
that's the nature of it. And maybe Seth had to eat lunch and couldn't come down